Imagine yourself at the edge of finishing everything. There is no despair, no fear, nor doubt, as there is nothing left. You are empty inside, wondering if the illuminating torment truly displays concern or simply satisfaction towards its internal morbidity. Close memories invade you one after the other, as if they strengthen your determination to finish what you have just started to finish with everything. Your vision of the world has changed. People are monsters, they are all bastards, and no one has ever been by your side. Or well, you actually had a family, someone who cared about you, no matter what. But unfortunately, she was dead too. This is the story of a boy who gave up everything and threw himself into the void. A boy who had nothing and no one, and only wanted to find his mother in a world that would definitely not be the earthly one. However, death had completely different plans for him. Regurgitating the water he had swallowed, a boy lay prostrate on a stretcher, lamenting the fact that the rescuers had arrived in time. That was Kyung-ho. After spending the afternoon in a hospital, the boy was walking in an alley, meditating on his regrets. Suddenly, a voice caught his attention, asking him to stop. At those words, Kyung-ho turned towards the wrong direction, as the one who was calling him was doing it from above. That was Sierra, nothing more and nothing less than death itself. After introducing herself, Sierra questioned the apparent stillness of the protagonist, who was not surprised or startled in the slightest, rather, quite the opposite. The boy was enthusiastic, as before his eyes, he was manifesting the desired outcome that had previously been taken away from him. Nevertheless, Sierra denied it completely. She was not there to take his soul. The woman said that in view of having caught his attention, she actually intended to offer him a deal, getting straight to the point. Sierra said that for the cost of his life's hope, she would allow him to use an item called the Ticket of the Underworld. Words that naturally made the protagonist question her. The woman added that this ticket would allow him to borrow the power of the dead, the use of the abilities of the greatest individuals who had existed throughout human history, asking for his confirmation in this regard. The offer of Sierra is completely rejected because that was not what Kyung-ho was looking for. Death knew it perfectly, deciding to throw words that momentarily shocked the protagonist. The woman said that his intention to die was the result of the desire to meet his mother in the afterlife. However, that person with whom he intended to reunite, unfortunately, was not in the underworld, because her wandering soul was still tied to the world. Despite her words, the protagonist chooses to continue his way, ignoring her completely. In a nearby alley, a group of thugs was gathered tormenting a defenseless cat. The trio of unhappy people were squeezing the creature like a rubber toy, catching the protagonist's attention as he walked by. Deciding to intervene, the protagonist asked the thugs to stop bothering the cat, as continuing with their disgusting entertainment would only cause harm to the animal. Naturally, the hornet's nest was stirred, and one of the individuals asked the protagonist if the cat he was playing with belonged to him. To which Kyung-ho denied completely, stating that the creature should have a family, showing the report he had just made to the police. He received a punch that took his breath away. The protagonist collapsed to the ground. The thug in question answered the name of Hyo-jong, a small boxer who would use the poor boy in front of him as his training bag. Resuming the beating, the punches easily reached the defenseless boy, who served as an example of technique for the infamous bastard who was teaching the correct way to hit his gang, turning to the end in a joint beating that had the protagonist trapped, who unfortunately was already accustomed to it. After a while, the beating had ended. The group of thugs were lying around, discussing disdainfully the protagonist who, lying on the ground, could not stop thinking. Kyung-ho wondered about the reason for the suffering of the weak, whether they were animals or people, in a world where violence was abundant. The protagonist comments that ultimately the best thing for himself would have been simply to die, as at least that way he would be with the only important person, and it's those words that bring distant memories to his mind. An accident at sea where a woman offered the life jacket she had to her young son. The woman tried to reassure the child, who suddenly noticed the harsh truth. The woman was bleeding profusely under the water, perhaps as a result of a fatal blow. With her son's tears, the mother insisted on her consolation with a radiant and melancholic smile, offering her last "I love you," disappearing forever, leaving nothing but sadness and horror in the mind of the little boy. Having regained consciousness, the protagonist watched the little cat that had previously been tormented, wondering why it had not run away, and offered his hand to the feline. The protagonist prepared to pet it, but the little animal passed by, uncomfortable. The protagonist reaffirmed his intention to soon meet his mother and was about to get up. But his attention was immediately captured by what was just behind him, a cruel and miserable scene, sad and also lamentable. The little feline meowed innocently towards his silent parent, who ultimately would never respond to him again. A terrible act of cruelty had been committed. The crew, noticing the protagonist's shock, takes responsibility for the act, mocking life and tarnishing the value of a family. Conscious that Sierra had been observing him from the beginning, Kyung-ho affirms this and agrees to make a pact with death. As the group of thugs intends to retreat, the protagonist's words stop them. Incredulous, the group laughs at Kyung-ho's attitude as he suddenly raises his fists in a boxing position, deciding to give them another beating. Two of the thugs try to attack, but within the laughter and ridicule, the leader notices something particular. As the two fools approach the protagonist, he tries to stop them, but it was too late. The blow had been dodged without any inconvenience, alluding that it may have been a simple coincidence. The group of thugs throws a frenzy of attacks that the protagonist dodges without any problem. One of the idiots asks Hyojong what was happening, to which he comments that the person in front of them was definitely not his opponent, asking the protagonist if he had been hiding his abilities from the beginning, adding a challenge for the next day in a gym, pretending to establish a fair fight. Suddenly, he throws a right hook, alleging that the attack was something that not even Muhammad Ali himself could have dodged, words that, in irony, would be his undoing. The protagonist's punch is full of damage on the subject, making him crash against a wall, staggering and completely unconscious. That little boxing champion had been defeated. The action had been executed with the help of a certain soul, in particular, the king of boxing, Muhammad Ali. In the afternoon, the group of thugs had received a well-deserved payback. Resuming the conversation, Sierra asks the protagonist's opinion about using the ticket that had been allowed to him. Kyung-ho shows no interest, questioning a way to meet his mother. Noticing the protagonist's clear resolution, Sierra proceeds to give a suggestion. It turned out that to fulfill his goal, he had to find a certain person, an individual with the ability to see spirits. Additionally, if the user of the underworld's ticket could meet this person, he could also witness his ability firsthand. In summary, he had to find an individual with the power to see spirits, in which case, as a user of the ticket, he could also see them. The seed had been planted, a possibility, a small hope of being able to meet his most loved person, was manifesting right in front of him. Sierra comments that the power of a ticket would allow him to borrow the power of the dead for an hour. Additionally, it would cost him nothing more than a year of life expectancy. The woman adds that humans could reach 100 years of age, so losing 20 or 30 years should not represent a problem for him. Therefore, he had to think about it clearly and decide how much time of his life expectancy he was willing to sacrifice. In response to her words, the protagonist says he would be willing to use the power of the dead for a year. Naturally, those words disappoint Sierra, who wonders if they had understood or not what had been previously explained. However, the protagonist clarifies his intention. He would not be involved in the pact for only a year, but rather, he would offer everything and would only keep the hope of a year of life. Words that fill Sierra with ecstasy, who records the dark pact in stone. The next day, while the protagonist remains reflective, he reviews recent events. He had made a pact with Death, who answered to the name of Sierra, and in addition, he had also used the power of the dead during the event. The protagonist tells Sierra that he feels disconnected from his original self. His body has definitely become someone else's. In response, Sierra shows him a fantasy scenario. Just ahead, the door of heaven had manifested, a structure that housed the names of the most important and representative figures of all human history. It was a mausoleum of celebrities. Sierra says that the death ticket was the key to open the door of heaven, whose exchange rate was nothing more than the individual's life expectancy. In that order of ideas, as long as he had the ticket with him, he could open the door at any time and place. Additionally, if he designated the spirit beforehand to take with the ticket, he could use it remotely without having to go through the door, in which case he would only have to break it. The woman adds that the power of the ticket could be maintained for the duration of an hour. Everything was established. Sierra intends to give the tickets equivalent to all the life expectancy that the protagonist had offered. However, she temporarily gives only one ticket, in case of not carrying the others with her. Kyung-ho agrees to the time it would take him to get the rest. In response, Sierra comments not to have security of that. However, she would give him exactly 100 tickets as a compensation once he returned from the underworld. Later, the woman offers the protagonist a necklace. This accessory would serve as a radar that would give him a signal in case he was close to his mother's soul. Everything essential had been discussed. As Sierra is about to leave, she is stopped by one last question that the protagonist throws, questioning any way to find the aforementioned person. So, Death leaves only one clue. He had to find the flickering amethyst, whose presence was actually much closer than he would believe. Back in the present, the protagonist concludes that the person with the ability to see spirits was really close to him. Most likely he should find him within his school, thus establishing the clear course of action to approach. Upon arriving in the classroom, his presence was received by nothing but ironic and derogatory comments, as he sat in front of his vulnerable desk that had once again been covered with insults and blasphemy. In short, he was at the lowest rung of the class. After a while, one of the idiots was playing with nunchucks, saying that he was doing it to learn how to have an advantage in fights. Later, the guy tells his companion that he will show him his skills with the weapon, throwing a strike on the protagonist's back. Naturally, the sudden blow shakes him. He had received it full on in the entire spine, throwing trash over Kyung-ho's ears. The bastard proceeds to mock his mother, which in turn receives sudden words that are unnatural for the attacker. The protagonist demands that violence stop or else he would give him a beating. Naturally, this falls on the ears of all present, who remain silent. However, the pride of the bully has been wounded and, as a result, he proceeds to the offensive. The protagonist is thrown against a set of chairs in the back of the classroom. Powerless, he tightens the death ticket, trying to use it. However, Sierra's words ring in his mind, reminding him that in order to see spirits he had to have a ticket with him while making physical contact with the individual, and unfortunately, he only had one. The bully begins to approach the protagonist, demanding an immediate response, which in turn, deciding to swallow his will, Kyung-ho chooses to submit once again, clarifying the small misunderstanding, and once again had been the protagonist of ridicule and humiliation as a small, helpless prey within the small jungle that was his class. After spending some time, Kyung-ho wondered how he should go about looking for the individual, considering the idea of making physical contact with all the students in the school, deciding that he should not waste any more time. The protagonist prepares to embark on the search for the person who would allow him to meet his mother again. Advancing uncertainly through the school's hallways, Kyung-ho wondered about his first interaction. Suddenly, his attention was caught by an engaging conversation between two girls where the color amethyst was mentioned. Opting to intervene, the protagonist executed his excuse by commenting that he had knowledge about palm reading and if they had no problem, he could read their palms for free. Upon these words, the girl reluctantly agreed. Having taken her hand, the protagonist began to observe the surroundings, an action that made it clear to the girl that the falsehood of his abilities was evident. However, this did not really pose a problem for her as she saw a hint of attraction in him. Completely defeated by the ineffectiveness of the contact, the protagonist retreated, giving the back to the girl who wanted to continue the lie. Having concluded the academic day, Kyung-ho, thoughtfully, commented that he had managed to approach 10 people without obtaining the slightest satisfactory result. The method was undoubtedly both demanding and complicated. Fortunately, he had the time span of a year, and given that the number of students was approximately 15, it would take him more than a month to execute the task. Additionally, since a ticket was essential to making contact with the right person, he could not use the only one he had on the day Sierra returned from the underworld with the rest. While walking through the streets, a group of voices caught his attention. Apparently, in an alley, a group of thugs were bullying a girl. They were not only all students at his school but also among the thugs was the one who had previously hit him in the classroom. Noticing that they were robbing the girl of her money, Kyung-ho questioned his intervention, concluding that getting involved was unnecessary, as in his view, they were all a bunch of trash. Resuming his way, and wondering again what to do to find the individual of the amethyst, the irony of fate called him sooner than later. Suddenly, the subject takes him by the neck and drags him into the alley, next to the girl. Alley where not only were there 3 people but an entire gang gathered right in front of him, as if it were the most influential gangster in the city. The fool who had hit him earlier was rejoicing at his presence, as the resentment was still palpable. The sack of sand from the afternoon had come to the den on its own. One of the thugs demanded the gall that had previously been shown in the classroom, to which the protagonist did nothing but regret not carrying more tickets. Suddenly, the protagonist's pants fall to the ground as a result of the enjoyment of the unhappy ones. The scenario was humiliating. This the protagonist felt it embedded in his flesh, the feeling of impotence and discomfort of being vulnerable for the satisfaction of others. Again faltering in the use of the ticket, Kyung-ho once again opts to swallow his pride and correspond to the facade, receiving a completely free slap on his face. Lying on the ground, pain invades him and impotence once again calls for rebellion, deciding to drown the courage within a sea of kicks and punches from those who position themselves as superior and dominant. In the frenzy of attacks, the thug becomes aware of the protagonist's gaze, a gaze that did not falter and that, despite trying to hide resentment, was noticeable. Without blinking, altered and a little afraid, the idiot requests that the rest hand over the nunchucks to resume the beating, deciding that this time he was going to break both his body and his will completely. While receiving each of the attacks, Kyung-ho questioned the circumstances that loomed over him. He was being beaten only because of his aggressor's bad mood, was mistreated for simple pleasure by a damn and sick enjoyment. Each and every abuse received had done nothing but break him. What was happening with his feelings? They didn't matter in the slightest. He was fed up, definitely fed up. Being on the brink of the fine line of anger and revenge, his resolution remains. He only had 1 ticket and should not use it. Exhausted, the thug looks at the punching bag that lay on the ground, in pain, unable to get up, but without the slightest hint of sadness or fear, opting to declare the exhibition of violence over. The guy orders the protagonist to leave as he no longer had any use for him. Wrapped in ridicule and contempt, Kyung-ho gets up with his head down, ready to leave the lion's den. However, as he is about to leave, one of the individuals unexpectedly takes the necklace that lay on his neck as if it were a valuable item, exclaiming that he would make money with it. Having noticed that the necklace was nothing more than cheap jewelry, the thug loses interest. So, Kyung-ho corresponds by asking for its return. The request is accepted under a repulsive condition. If the protagonist wanted to recover the necklace, he would have to drink from a box of spoiled milk, a drink that, to make matters worse, would include the cigarette butts used by each of the thugs. Those were undoubtedly the height of misfortune. Choosing to drink it without questioning, the protagonist takes the drink, disappointing the group of unhappy people who expected a greater show of revulsion and suffering. As he is about to receive the necklace back that they had taken from him, the course of action suddenly changes. The deal was not respected. Not only had they thrown the necklace to the ground with force, but they were also constantly hitting it with the intention of destroying it, leaving the radar, the only means to find his deceased mother, completely broken. The group of aggressors rejoiced because they had finally been able to capture the longed-for despair they so wanted to provoke in the boy. They had succeeded in bringing Kyung-ho to despair, to collapse, to fall from the thin thread of anger that drowned his emotions in a single goal. A goal for which keeping an intact piece of paper had become completely irrelevant. Taking a position, the protagonist's hand rests on his aggressor's ribs, patient and expectant, as if some kind of calm preceded a storm, a blow that was looming at a clear distance of just 1 inch. The opponent had been subdued, staggering and twisted in pain, which immediately captured the attention of all the nearby individuals who wondered what had just happened. Ignoring the questions and exclamations, the protagonist notices the presence of the nunchucks on the ground, deciding to take them in his hands. He had been patient. He had tolerated everything. In short, he had planned to let it go, as his attention and energy were demanded by much more important things. They had crossed the line. It was time for punishment. Balancing the weapon like a fervent master versed in martial arts, the soul that dwelled in his body exhibited his abilities. This was none other than the founder of Jeet Kune Do, the master Bruce Lee. Deciding that this was nothing more than a bad joke, the group of unhappy people proceed to mock him, opting to attack him altogether. A bad choice. The first victim threw a strike that is easily neutralized with a direct attack on the face with nunchucks without stopping there. The protagonist throws a whole set of strikes that connect one after the other without leaving any space for reaction, showing to the rest of the spectators that this was not a joke. He was not a simple amateur. Having completely destroyed the first idiot, the attack continues, reaching a duo that was approaching the counterattack and concluding exactly the same way as the first one. One after the other, each of the individuals collapsed on the ground like chess pieces lying on the board, defenseless and useless in front of the true force. Having taken one of the individuals as a temporary shield, the protagonist faces another horde of inepts who sought to hit a blow, clearing the way without the slightest problem. In front of the scene that was happening in front of him, the leader of the gang lay stunned, throwing himself like a miserable rat behind the protagonist. Nevertheless, with a simple second analysis and a solid judgment, the surprise attack had been stopped efficiently and elegantly, counterattacking immediately on the face of the pathetic rat who now, with the broken wall, became a punching bag. The blood boiled inside Kyung-ho, who squeezed out every last drop of resentment that his heart held. The scene was as wonderful as it was terrifying, depending on the side put, which for the accomplices could not be more than sowing terror. A whole festival of punches rained down, up, left and right, leaving no room for breathing, thus ending with the strike that had started it all, the light contact of an open palm, separated only by an inch, whose strike held the power of a true warrior. Having fallen the evening, Kyung-ho marched triumphantly over the miserable aggressors, directing his gaze and attention to the main instigator, stating not only that he had warned them but also not to dare to marginalize or abuse anyone else or otherwise. All their limbs would end up paying a high price. Having forced and received the answer from the individual kneeling in front of him, the remaining duo of vandals lay terrified and trembling, deciding to run away in front of the protagonist's gaze. The adrenaline had stopped flowing, the satisfaction decreased, and critical judgment returned to his mind, enveloping him. Conscious of an undeniable fact, he had broken the only ticket he had, so the encounter with his mother was nothing more than a distant goal. Helpless, the protagonist wonders what he should do next. He did not have any ticket and also did not know how long it would take Sierra to return with the rest. Suddenly, his attention is captured by the girl who had previously been vulnerable. The protagonist asks the girl what she was doing, to which she replies that she was searching for a particular ring that had been taken from her. She also adds that it would have been worse without his presence, so she would compensate him in some way in the future if they met again. These words capture Kyung-ho's attention. After all, the aforementioned special ring featured a small amethyst gem. Recalling Sierra's last words about the individual he would have to look for, the brilliant amethyst, noticing that the girl was leaving quickly, the protagonist tries to call her attention, but it's too late, the girl had left. However, now he knew the face of the person he was looking for, that presence that had the ability to see spirits. The next day, the protagonist reviewed the previous events. He had met Sierra again, who told him about the necklace that had been broken in the alley, giving him back the repaired necklace. Sierra also offered the coveted 100 tickets that she had previously promised. Now, everything was ready. Kyung-ho prepared to meet the girl who had the ability to see the dead. While he was running through the nearby streets, the carefree run surprised a passerby who was carrying an ice cream. The ice cream was sent to the ground instead of her mouth. Opting to apologize, and being aware that he did not have time to lose, the protagonist offers as compensation the first bundle of coins that he could collect from the passerby, who was stupefied or perhaps speechless, only watching the distracted boy who had taken her treat. The girl watched the pair of coins that had been given to her, resulting naturally in annoyance and disappointment. In the middle of her tantrum, the girl chooses to keep silent, suddenly mentioning that she should be careful because she was outside. The protagonist is found in a cafe in front of the girl with the amethyst, who is asking for confirmation about what had just been heard. Everything had been said in detail. They needed her ability to see a deceased woman, who turned out to be the mother of the person who had asked for her help in the first place. Doubtful, the girl remained silent for a few seconds, deciding in the end to cooperate with the protagonist in the best way she could. Naturally, Kyung-ho was now completely excited because the woman in front of him apparently was able to see spirits and could allow him to meet his mother. Seeing the protagonist's reaction, the girl throws a giggle, mentioning that the ring on her hand was carrying a telekinetic power that allowed her to notice the presence of spirits. Suddenly, the girl takes a spoon in her hands and throws an unexpected blow to the protagonist's head, capturing the attention of the mysterious passerby who had previously lost her ice cream. Complaining about her actions, the protagonist asks for explanations, to which the girl excuses herself, saying that she had to do it because of the presence of a vengeful spirit that was trying to possess him. Noticing this scene and not understanding completely what was happening, the mysterious passerby makes her conjecture, mentioning that the idiot who had taken her ice cream had been rejected. The protagonist thanks the girl for her kind and considerate action, which had saved him, to which the girl mentions not needing them. This was something proper of her family, a task that had been executed generation after generation. The girl comments that she usually accepted commissions during the night because of her occupation with school. However, since the protagonist was special to her eyes, she would help him without problems. The girl throws a suggestive comment of a popular drink from the cafe, to which the protagonist, without hesitation, takes her up on the not-so-indirect hint. Having bought the drinks, whose value was definitely not cheap, the protagonist wonders about the appearance of spirits, considering the necessary conditions to be able to see them. While he was waiting for the drinks, the girl becomes aware of a mysterious individual who was approaching, deciding to leave the establishment immediately, taking the protagonist by surprise, who was doubtful about the contact, fearing to be labeled as a pervert. The protagonist becomes aware of the pursuit that was taking place on the other side of the street. The girl was being chased by someone. As he embarked on the race, the ice cream girl walked humming, completely absorbed, and received a sudden push from the protagonist, who throws her purchases on the ground. She was furious during the pursuit. The duo of individuals disappears into the sea of passers-by. Given the urgency of the situation, the protagonist wonders what course of action to take, deciding to use another ticket. He now flew through the skies with the use of pure physical ability. Silvio Carter's soul, a long jump athlete, received his athletic abilities and landed on a nearby terrace. The protagonist's vision evaluates the perimeter, locating the girl who was being chased while she agilely swings through the buildings. The ice cream girl was lying with a small decorated box on the ground with a radiant smile. The happy young lady lay satisfied with her work, wiping a little sweat from her forehead, feeling satisfied with her efforts, contemplating the small cat house she had prepared with care. The feeling doesn't last long, as he was grateful to have achieved a landing without difficulties. The protagonist's attention is captured by what he designates as a piece of garbage built possibly by a primary school child. Suddenly his attention is captured by an aura of anger right in front of him, an annoyed girl questioning his actions. Noticing his attitude, the protagonist proceeds to apologize, assuming that what he just stepped on was his own. While fixing the disaster, Kyung-ho becomes aware that the girl in question turned out to be the one he had previously taken the ice cream from, adding that he had no time to waste complaining about the situation that had developed in the presence of the girl who was already annoying him. The previously cute little cat house now looked like a simple piece of garbage. The atmosphere was tense. Sparks would explode at the slightest movement, without a doubt, bombarding each other with screams and claims. The girl claims the original form of her craftsmanship, to which the protagonist, in complete shamelessness, proceeds to call his original creation nothing more than garbage. Words that surprise the girl, making her aware that she had made a mistake with her rude and imprudent comment. The protagonist tries to correct his statement, his attention being suddenly captured by the strange behavior of the girl, who seemed to be talking to another person, leading him to question the sanity of the girl. Kyung-ho, trying to resume his walk, comments that he would take responsibility and pay for the box, to which the girl completely denies and announces that she didn't need it, as in her view, since it was of no importance to him, she would simply escape again, as she had been doing, something that only angered her. Being aware of this, the protagonist comments that he had the urgency of meeting someone and receives a response that from the girl's ignorance had touched a delicate area. She had questioned the upbringing of someone she assumed as a thoughtless person. Suddenly the protagonist explodes, cutting the girl's words, commenting that they had nothing to do with something that from the beginning had been nothing more than garbage, adding that more important matters demanded his presence, exceeding himself a little in his comments. Kyung-ho points the girl out as nothing more than a weird bug with whom he should not have engaged in any conversation from the beginning, causing complaints from who demands respect since he didn't know her. Opting to throw more insults, the protagonist proceeds to call her crazy, hurting the girl completely, who announces that she had no desire to see him again or talk to him, concluding the discussion with an uncomfortable moment, resuming his steps as he embarked on the race. His steps are stopped by a voice that pronounces gloomy words, opting to turn around. The person in front of him questions his relationship with the girl he had been looking for, the aforementioned person capable of seeing spirits, a scammer. The man comments that the student used to tell people that she had the ability to see spirits, surprising the protagonist, who by his expression indicated like an open book that he had also been a victim. Apparently, not only was it the man and the protagonist, But a whole group of people had been victims of the spirit observer, being scammed like a bunch of fools. The pursuit had been in vain. A ticket had been wasted completely and the small hope was eclipsed again. He had returned exactly to the starting point, without the slightest hint of novelty for his cause. Suddenly, the protagonist's attention is captured by a familiar voice. There was someone nearby who appeared to be talking to someone, the previously called crazy girl, discussing angrily about recent events, announcing that in case of meeting again with the one who had been a nuisance, she would give him a beating. Words that catch the protagonist's attention, who, captive of a pulsating presentiment, begins to approach the girl, finally making contact. The action surprises the girl, who slowly began to turn around, showing her surprise and confusion, which was becoming pulsating within those big and peculiar amethyst eyes that shone like jewels.